Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Unfucking Your CX. I am your host, Zack Hamilton, but I know you already know that. What you're curious about today is who is in the hot seat, what's the topic that is just driving them insane, and what's the three-player tips to unfuck it. And I'm so excited to have Doug on the episode today. Doug, welcome to the hot seat.
Thanks, Zach.
You and I met on LinkedIn. You and I have had great interactions, great engagement, but we've also debated a bit on customer experience as well on LinkedIn. So, really looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely not an echo chamber. I tend to march to my own drummer. So let's see where that drum beat takes us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Doug, we all know that these types of conversations, they need a little bit of a safe space. They don't just happen. So, where's our conversation going to take place today? Is that your favorite pub, restaurant? Are we on a walk? Like, are we at an event? Like, where is this thing going to happen?
So my wife and I are big karaoke singers. So yeah, let's say we're at the Dad's Karaoke Bar here in San Antonio, Texas.
Oh my gosh, I love that. What's your karaoke song?
I have a bunch, but most recently I've actually spread my wings a little bit and I'm doing Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin.
Oh my gosh, what a classic. I'm sure you've seen, who was it, the Heart Sisters on YouTube did their tribute about 10 years ago. Have you seen that?
Yeah. Yes.
Insane, right? Insane. Well, I guess I'm just as brave because I typically will default to like "Don't Stop Believing" or something from Journey. I love Journey, so I'll pick any of their
Yeah.
songs. And if I'm feeling really good, I may even try and lay down a track from Eminem.
Nice.
That doesn't go too well though. But Doug, you have this responsibility here in the US from an XLA perspective with the XLA Institute. And so you have had so many conversations. You've seen it and heard it all. What's that one topic that keeps coming up over and over and over that just makes you absolutely cringe that you want to unfuck today?
Yeah. So the topic that is most burning in my mind is the traditional metrics that we focus in on, and understand that my background is sort of in IT service desk, but I see this convergence going on between IT service desk having to be more experientially driven and call and contact center needing to be more technically driven. So there's sort of this convergence going on, and all of them have each of those areas have their own traditional metrics. But all of those metrics tend to be productivity driven. They're all about outputs and they're not about outcomes. And we try to say that NPS is the right one, or CSAT is the right one, but none of them really align with, when we talk to the customer, what they really feel about the way that we've provided service to them. And so my sort of burning issue is getting rid of these traditional metrics, or at least de-emphasizing these traditional metrics and focusing in on things that really tell the tale of how does the customer feel? How do they feel about the interaction that they've had with us? And to that end, you really look at AI going on right now, and there's going to be this reevaluation of these traditional metrics, because if there's not, they're not, we're not going to meet them anymore. I mean, FCR is not going to be what it was. Handle time is not going to be what it was, because all the easy stuff is going to get soaked up on the front end. So these traditional metrics, that's the burning issue for me right now.
Dude, I totally agree with you. It's so funny is everyone thinks that I'm an NPS hater. And quite frankly, like I hate when NPS is used alone in isolation. And I hate when the fact that everyone believes that NPS is the ultimate goal of a CX strategy, right? But I'm with you. I was actually just debating someone on LinkedIn, I kid you not, earlier today, where his statement was really about, hey, it's not just NPS in isolation, but it is connecting the dots between all this other kind of contextual data. And so my feedback to him was, then why even ask the NPS score?
Yeah.
Like, why even use the score if it's really not important? That the most important part, which praise him, he was talking about action, but he's like, I'm not taking action on the score, I'm taking action on everything else. Well, then why the hell ask the question?
Right. And then even beyond that, when it comes to things like NPS, people are asking for benchmark data. It's like, well, why is that important to you? It isn't what the customer's telling you is wrong. Shouldn't that be what's important, not how you stack up to your competitor? The competition is irrelevant because the things that aren't going well for them may be entirely different from what's not going well for you. And it may be more or less important to their customers, internal or external, than the issue that you're not doing well on. So yeah, I get what you're saying for sure.
Yeah, it's this other piece too around, it's what's interesting is when you think about this future of agentic CX, like to your point, traditional experience management metrics won't even be, I mean, they're not relevant. And I actually had that post yesterday about all around kind of signal architecture, right? And one of the pieces was, well, what percentage of our signals are actually actionable? And someone replied back and was like, why does that even matter? And what matters about it is if you truly believe, one, if you believe that your autonomous agents are going to be able to make decisions, you have to have a high percent of quality data that they can take action on. But even without the presence of agents, if you're truly customer centric or customer obsessed, and if you can't see me, I'm doing it in quotes, air quotes, because those are the buzzwords, and you're constantly taking action, you have to have quality data to even action on.
True, but I'll throw a caveat into that one. One of the things that I find is there's an over reliance on data right now, or an overemphasis on data. And the reason I say that is if you stop and think, what CX is really aiming to do is improve that end-to-end experience, but also drive revenue, drive loyalty. So what we're really tasked with in this business is making sure that the bottom line is met. Where we miss on the data is we miss the people who've absolutely given up on us because we don't send surveys to them. And so there's this black hole of incomplete data that we're completely missing out on when we look at things from a very traditional perspective.
Yeah, no dispute with you at all about the outcomes, right? I mean, I'm the biggest advocate of, customer lifetime value should be your North Star. But I agree with you when it comes to the traditional sense of the way that we acquire kind of customer feedback. And you have that group of the silent majority who, look, they've been NPS spammed so much that they just don't want another survey. I kid you not, I think surveys are probably some of the reasons why people have their fake accounts that they set up just to get all marketing and NPS spam in their inbox. But there's also kind of that behavioral data, right? There's that observation data on those silent customers that you would still use as a signal to really start to understand what are they doing. And so, Doug, when you think about kind of making this pivot from traditional metrics more over to like XLAs, let's get into 3 player tips. What's the first player tip?
The first player tip is you have to, back to your North Star comment, you have to know what the organizational North Stars are. What are the priorities? And then what you need to do is figure out from those priorities which ones are achievable in what time frame. A big difference between SLA and XLA is SLAs usually get put in place and they never get revisited for decades. XLAs, typically the lifespan of an XLA is about 15. So what you really want to do is focus in on what are those short to midterm priorities that you want to be able to achieve to drive a bigger experience, a better experience. So that would be sort of the first point. The second point is knowing what data is available to you and who owns it. And that governance piece is huge when it comes to XLA because we're very accustomed in support functions to only worry about support data. But when, as an example I always give, is a primary XLA that any organization should focus in on is the employee onboarding. And anybody can improve employee onboarding. Anybody who says they've got it right is either lying or deluded. So employee onboarding, data would come in from HR, it would come in from training, it would come in from the hardware deployment, it would come in from accesses and asset management. So there's all these different data points in that onboarding journey that fall outside of our normal purview. So knowing what data exists and who owns it and how you can get access to it would be the second key. And then third is that the third point would be making sure that you get buy-in across the board. The big difference between SLA and XLA is that ownership has to be shared. SLAs traditionally, and KPIs traditionally for that matter, are within a silo. So each functional support area has their own SLAs, and they're only worried about theirs. They're not so much worried about who inherits that ticket down the road, because they've got their own SLAs. XLAs, by contrast, have to be end-to-end owned, and so that means shared ownership. So you need to establish this governance structure that champions that end-to-end experience, and everybody has to participate. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And so what I would add to that, Zach, is the Experience Management Office, XMO, which is what we position as that governance structure, is a committee that typically is going to share the results of the XLA. And the XLAs, here's one of the other things with contrasting and comparing SLA to XLA is an XLA will have a target, but there isn't necessarily a score that you have to achieve. And so there's no penalties associated with it. There's no incentives to achieve, other than ideally what you want to do is maybe tie that XLA back to your bonus structure. And so everybody wins if we win. By that, what I mean is that XLA or that XMO will focus in on those XLAs. They'll review them usually on at least a monthly basis as opposed to quarterly, so it's a little bit more frequent. They'll identify what's working well, what's moved forward, what's taken a step back, what has stagnated. They'll determine, are these still the XLAs that we should continue to be focused on for the next 15 months? If not, let's scrap it. Or let's adjust it. Maybe we don't have the right data points. Maybe the sentiment is good, but we're not seeing movement on the metric. And so we may have the wrong data points. So that's what this group does, is they collaborate in a very collaborative fashion to identify, are we measuring the right things? Are these still the priorities that we need to focus in on for the next 12 to 15 months? And are we making progress? And if not, why not? Everybody owns a stake in the success. And rather than pointing fingers, it becomes, how can we help one another out? Right. Yeah. And what I do, Zach, is my first step, and I didn't include this in the three keys, but my first step is always to make sure that I have a clear understanding of what the organizational priorities are. And I do that through workshops. And those workshops are pure discovery. And I'll give you a quick example. I went in and worked with a global pharmaceutical company in Chicago about 3 years ago to design the first XLAs for them. And I went in supposedly, only working with frontline operations, and I'm starting asking questions about, how do you do certificate management for your servers? And they're like, well, what does that have to do with anything? I'm like, well, what happens when a certificate expires? Well, we get a bunch of calls. Okay, who's managing those certificates? Well, nobody is except the product owners. Well, okay, great. So you have individuals across the organization who own these products and are responsible for certificate management, but you don't have it centralized in any fashion. And it generates back-end volume for operations when something goes wrong. So that's why it's important, right? So you need to start thinking very holistically and get the organization thinking very holistically for these to work. Right. Sure. Easiest place to find me is where you and I connected in the first place, Zach, and that's on LinkedIn. I always say a business card is as good as the paper it's written on. LinkedIn lasts forever, or at least as long as Microsoft continues to support it. Yeah, that's the easiest place. All right, happy to. Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.